in 5 minutes and make it as exciting as I can possibly make it. Because I hated history when I was a little girl. At this age, I appreciate history. And now I understand why they say those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. In order for you to understand why Western civilization is very different than the Islamic world, you need to understand the history of Islam. When Prophet Muhammad supposedly revealed his revelation from the angel Gabriel that he is supposed to be the last of the prophets in the early 600s, he started preaching in his own city, Mecca. He tried to recruit friends and followers to be able to spread his religion. And he tried for 12 years and failed. And after 12 years, he was only able to recruit his immediate family and friends. So he decided, if I go to Medina, which was the Jewish hub of Arabia, the business hub where the Jews lived, if I go there and preach my religion to them, if they accept me, that will buy me respect and stature between my own people, and they will accept me. So Prophet Muhammad started borrowing a lot from the Old Testament to make his religion more palpable to the Jews, to make it a lot similar. This is why you see a lot of similarities between Judaism and Islam. For example, Jews don't eat pigs, Muslims don't eat pigs. Jews pray a few times a day, Muslims pray a few times a day. Jews fast on Yom Kippur, Muslims fast on Ramadan. And this is why you started seeing a lot of good writing in the beginning of the Quran when Prophet Muhammad was saying all the good things about the people of the book. He took his message and went to Medina trying to recruit the Jews, talking about the people of the book, talking about how similar the two religions are. When they refused to accept him and follow him as the last of the prophet, that's when he turned against them and started killing them and started expelling them. That's when Islam went from a spiritual movement for the first 12 years of Islam into a political movement cloaked in religion after the year of the Hijrah, after Muhammad went to Medina and the Jews did not accept him. He became a military warrior and declared war on them and started expelling them. Jews and Christians became dhimmi, or second-class citizens. They were only allowed to stay alive and not be killed only by paying the jizya or the protection tax. So they had a choice: convert to Islam, or if you want to stay alive, you have to pay the jizya or protection tax, living as dhimmi in the Islamic nation. Christians and Jews could not ring church bells. Jews could not blow the shofar. Christians could not ring church bells. They could not pray publicly. Christians and Jews could not gather together and build new churches or new temples. And the way they paid the jizya or the protection tax was in a monthly ceremony where they would get together downtown and the Jew would kneel on his knee and hand his goods to the mullah, who would take the goods as the price for buying the protection. And in many areas, Jews and Christians were given necklaces to wear as a receipt that they paid their jizya or their protection tax. Jews considered najis under Islam. Najis is bodily fluid. Najis is garbage. Najis is dogs. Najis is dirty. So Christians and Jews were treated as second-class citizens. Islam continued to grow. As Islam grew, more people became dhimmi or second-class citizens. Jews and Christians were given identifiable clothing. The yellow star, which was given to the Jews that most people think is a German invention. It was actually an Islamic invention in the 9th century in Iraq by the second Khalif al-Mutawakkil of Iraq, who invented the yellow star for the Jews to be identified as they walked down the street. Because Jews were considered najis, if a Muslim man or a Jew walked on the same side of the street, the Jew had to cross the other side so the Muslim man can walk, so he's not dirtied by the filth of the Jew. Christians were given the zunnar, the belt, which most of you men are wearing right now. That was an Islamic invention for the Christians. Islam continued to grow. They went all the way to Jerusalem. They conquered Jerusalem. Christians couldn't ring their church bells in Jerusalem. The Pope in Rome in 1090 told the Christians, how could you sit idly by and allow your brethren to be suffer like this in the Holy Land? You need to go liberate the Christians. You need to go help the Christians. That's why the Crusaders were launched. The Crusaders were not launched because they just felt like waking up in the morning and going and converting a bunch of Muslims or beheading them. The Crusaders were launched to liberate Jerusalem. And they were able to liberate Jerusalem for less than 100 years before Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi, Saladin, took it back, and Jerusalem remained under Islamic control until 1967, when the State of Israel liberated Jerusalem, where Christians, Jews, and Muslims could pray under the same sky. The Crusaders continued fighting Islam, and for 300 years they tried and failed. And by the 1300s, the Crusaders disappeared because they could not win against Islam. Islam continued to expand. They went all the way to Central Europe. They went all the way to China. They went to India. They conquered Spain. They changed the name of Spain from Spain to Andalusia. And they started, as they advanced, as they conquered more nations, more people paid the jizya, or the protection tax. And this is how the Islamic Empire grew. It went all the way until they was stopped at the gates of Vienna on 9/11. 9/11 is not a date that Osama bin Laden just picked out of a hat. 9/11 is a symbolic date in the Islamic calendar. By the 1600s, Islam had covered more of the earth's surface than the Roman Empire did at its peak. Between the 1600s and the 1800s, the Europeans were experiencing the European Industrial Revolution, where the Europeans were able to invent products on factory lines, where they are able to make money and sell products, which gave them the money to build a strong army in order to fight the Muslims. And that's how they were able to stop them at the gates of Vienna on 9/11. The Europeans started the pushback against Islam. They pushed them out of Europe. They pushed them out of all the way to the Middle East and North Africa. By 1924, the Islamic Empire ended. In 1924, the Islamic Caliphate ended in Turkey by President Ataturk, who was a secularist. He ended the Islamic Empire, and he gave women rights to vote. He gave women a right to an education, a right to work, a right to choose a husband. He forbid women from wearing the hijab. He forbid men from wearing the beard. The Muslims hate him so much that they consider him a Jewish agent, because they believe that his mother and her bloodline was Jewish, and that was the influence on Ataturk. By the time the Islamic Empire, or the Islamic Caliphate, or the Islamic State ended in 1924, the Islamic Caliphate had existed for 1400 years, and it ended less than 100 years ago. By the time the Islamic Caliphate ended in 1924, 270 million people around the world were killed by Islam. 270 million. And we didn't have weapons of mass destruction, and there was nuclear weapons. All of these people were killed, butchered by the sword. The people in the world, less than 100 years ago, how many people knew this history? Please raise your hand. We in America have failed to educate our children about history. We in America failed to educate our population about history. Our children in high school, you take any 17, 16-year-old kid, 18-year-old kid, and ask them about World War II. They can't even tell you what happened in World War II. For them, it's ancient history, and we still have our World War II veteran walking among us. That's how little we know of history. Islam ended in 1924, the Caliphate. People thought the Caliphate will never be resurrected. The Caliphate will never come back. But two things happened in the Middle East in the last century that made the Islamists be able to resurrect the Caliphate. Number one is the discovery of oil in Saudi Arabia, which we were able to discover and were stupid enough to allow them to nationalize it. And the number two that happened was Ayatollah Khomeini coming to power in 1979. That gave the Islamists the money and also the spiritual covering in order to explode on the world stage. And people say, oh, well, the Wahhabis exported their Wahhabi radical religion. The Wahhabis are the name of Wahhab. They're not a different sect of Islam. They follow the authentic preaching of Prophet Muhammad, the way Prophet Muhammad lived and practiced his religion. This is why neither you or me or any infidel can step a foot in Mecca, because as far as they're concerned, we are filth. And as infidels, we're not allowed to step a foot, not President Obama and not anybody else. As a matter of fact, Al-Qaeda used to use Saudi Arabia and its success as an excuse to recruit members, as the example to show them how Allah has blessed Saudi Arabia because of the way they adhere to the tenets of Islam. And today we talk about ISIS. ISIS is not a new invention. ISIS resurrected the caliphate that ended less than 100 years ago. Except we are too ignorant and too uninformed to understand what ISIS is doing and why ISIS is succeeding. Two things you need to understand about Islam and the principles of war in Islam. One is the law of taqiyya, which means lying and deception. It means that a Muslim man can lay his hand on the Quran and swear that he is telling the truth, knowing that he is lying, but also knowing that the Quran will forgive him because he is advancing the cause of Islam. The second thing you need to know about is that the Treaty of Al-Hudaybiyah, which is an Islamic principle of war and a model on how to deceive your enemy when you have to sign peace treaties with your enemy. And it is based on an example by Prophet Muhammad. Prophet Muhammad was attacking the Meccans and their caravans when he was living in Medina. One day he attacked them because this is how he got the goodies. He would attack them, rob them, and spread the goodies among his men. And this is how he was able to recruit, because this is how people made money without working. And so he attacked the Meccan caravans. When he realized he's not able to defeat the Meccans in that city of Al-Hudaybiyah, in that place, he signed a 10-year treaty with them. Does that sound familiar? A 10-year treaty with them that says he will not attack them, he will have peace with them, he will not declare war on them. Muhammad used the treaty for 2 years to build his military, strengthen his army, and when he realized he was strong enough to attack his enemies when they least expected it, because they thought they had a peace treaty with Muhammad, he broke the treaty, attacked them 2 years later, and Mecca fell within 24 hours because they were not expecting the attack. And that became a principle of war in Islam. And to give you an example of how that is practiced, this is why anything signed with Iran means nothing to them. And to give you an example of how this law has been put to use in recent history, Yasser Arafat, who's not an Islamist, but he is a Muslim, met with the Israelis and signed the Oslo Accord in 1993. Remember all the handshaking at the lawn of the White House? The Oslo Accord, Yasser Arafat used the peace treaty, the Oslo Accord with Israel, to get Israel to bring him back and give him his territory, finance his military, train his police, and give his police the weapons. Yasser Arafat broke the Oslo Accord 8 years later, didn't even wait 10 years, and declared the second intifada in 2000, and all hell broke loose. He used the same treaty to win and deceive against his enemies and deceive his enemies. When Jordanian press, after Yasser Arafat signed the Oslo Accord with Israel, and Egyptian press would interview Yasser Arafat, and they would say, how could you sign a peace treaty with the devil? How could you sign a peace treaty with the Jews? Yasser Arafat will tell them, remember Hudaybiyah. That's all he would have to say. The whole Muslim world knew exactly what Yasser Arafat was talking about. We in the West and the Jews in Israel, it was over their heads. Nobody understood what Hudaybiyah was referring to. And this is the type of deception that we are dealing with. So when Iran signs a peace treaty with the United States for 10 years, they are using us as useful idiots, as gullible, ignorant people who are signing a peace treaty with the devil in order for Iran to continue her thing.
That are saying, oh no, this should be Palestinian land. Palestine will be free from the river to the sea and all this stuff. that stuff is total nonsense. I'll just be honest with you. Because that land was given to God. If you understand anything about the Bible, that's Israel's promised land. And I'm going to support them. I may not support everything their government does, but I'm going to support that land, and I'm supporting them heavily financially, and also, which I'm helping Jews make Aliyah back to Israel. That's supporting Israel. And, of course, I'm trying to help them spiritually try to get to heaven, and that's one of the best ways I could support them, besides financially as well. So this approach really aims to balance this prophetic territory and with modern geopolitics, but it sparks concern, right? Is Israel giving up its divine inheritance in exchange for peace and global approval? The Bible says that they will. This is what I'm saying. When I wrote a letter to President Trump here a while back, I told him, you should never, ever try to coerce Israel to give up 1 square inch of promised land for peace. I don't believe they should go into the Abraham Accords. Some people would say, Dave, what in the world? This is their effort towards peace. Look, I believe in the Bible. I believe in doing what God says. You trust God, God will take care of you. But the problem is that not everybody in Israel trusts God. Did I just say that? I think I did. Do you know that there are a huge amount of Jews over there in Israel that are atheists? A lot of the younger generation, they don't see Israel as the promised land like you and I would, or like the mothers and fathers did. And so that's a hard truth for somebody, but it's the truth. I was in Israel just a few weeks ago, and they had when I say a giant LGBTQ parade, I mean they shut down the entire center of Jerusalem. Me and my wife had to walk, coming from our college back to our hotel, we had to walk blocks and blocks and blocks out of the way to try to get around the blockade. They have police at every street. And to get to my hotel, I had to go through security checkpoints and all kinds of stuff because they blocked off the entire center of Jerusalem for an LGBTQ parade. Well, that's diametrically opposed to the Word of God. God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah for that, and other sexual perverse things. But I'm just saying that was one of the prominent sins in, if not the prevalent sin in Sodom and Gomorrah, and God destroyed the whole city for that. But yet Jerusalem, I was there a few weeks ago, and they had this thousands and thousands and thousands of people participate in an LGBTQ parade. Do I support that? Absolutely not. But it shows you the mindset of people, of some Jews, some of the Jews that live in Israel. They're not all part of the Book of Acts church, folks. Let's just say that. And so they're going to make some decisions in the near future that are diametrically opposed to the Word of God. Number one, trading land for peace. They should never do that, but they've done it before. That's why Ariel Sharon did it in 2005 with Gaza. Look at what's happened as a result of that. Did that bring peace? Absolutely not. And so it's going to happen again. They're going to trade land for peace. And I don't want to be a part of it. I certainly don't want America being a part of it, and I hope we're not. So do I want them? I would love for them to have peace in the Middle East. I'd love for them to. But I don't think they should sign any peace agreements with the heathen. I just don't. And that's the Bible.
It's extraordinary to me to watch the stock market in Israel trade at all-time highs.
It's like a vertical wall.
Even in the midst of all of this. Give us some perspective about Israel today and where things are going after the tragic events of October 7th, after all of the fighting and the conflicts. And then I want to ask you about whether or not you can get back to startup nation, entrepreneurship, innovation.
We never left it.
But aren't those people now in the reserve?
Oh, yeah, but the Army, well, first let's understand, there are two innovation nations in the world. One is called the United States of America, and the other is called Israel. These are engines of innovation, of creativity, of entrepreneurship that are enormous. Now, Israel wasn't always that way. I had to lead a free market revolution, first as finance minister with 100 reforms, just to take us away from the semi-socialist economy that we had and unleash the genius of our people and the innovative spirit. And we did that. And, if you had visited Tel Aviv 20 years ago, 22 years ago, there was one high-rise, one skyscraper there. Today, there's a forest. And I remember when I took on the job of finance minister, my boy was a little young boy. He said, "Daddy, look at the skyline in Tel Aviv, and look at the skyline in New York. I mean, we're never going to be like that." And I said, "Well, relax, son. Your father is going to be the finance minister, and you'll see that will happen." And if you look at the skyline in Tel Aviv today, it's a remarkable change. And that's basically the unleashing of free market powers of capitalism, okay? So once we did that with 100 reforms, exactly that happened. And what happened is that we used the technological capability that is built in our army. The military produces technology. You just saw that. You saw the greatest technology. Intel, weaponry, precision, I don't want to even talk about it, okay? AI, you name it. All come to the fore and achieve this remarkable victory. That's Israeli technology. That technology that was embedded in our military, the minute we liberated the market forces, burst out into the startup nation. So the fact that you have reservists, yeah, we have reservists, but believe me, they're working in the army while they're there to make even greater inventions that nobody can imagine. Today we signed right here in the Blair House, an AI agreement between America and Israel, the two most innovative societies on the planet. And boy, is that going to be big. And AI has, incredible potential. We became one of the two preeminent cyber powers in the world, small Israel. It's gigantic in terms of brain power, in terms of initiative, and so on.
Where does that leave China?
Well, I think, where does it leave the free world? You want the free societies to have the most advanced, cutting-edge technology on Earth, and I think we do. And I think the reason the stock market is going up, you have to compare two stock markets. Look at the Iranian stock market and look at the Israeli stock market.
And the American stock market.
And the American stock market. And you know what? It's related. Those are, in Iran, it's below the floorboards. In Israel, it's vertical. In America, it's shooting up because of the things that people have confidence. They have confidence in the future. They have confidence in innovation. And you know that the products of the mind change. Well, the conceptual products are so, the value added there is so enormous. But we're also looking at other things. We're looking at oil and gas and the possibility of opening up energy markets, opening up communication markets, opening up trade routes in the Middle East, opening up the trade routes between Asia, India, and Europe, going through the Arabian Peninsula, right through through Israel. It changes the whole thing. This thing, the markets aren't stupid. They're pretty smart. Political markets don't adjust quite as quickly as the economic markets. The economic markets enjoy collective wisdom and rapid wisdom. Political markets take a little longer, but they adjust too. And I have great confidence in the future.
So let me just make a few comments on what he said. So in Bible prophecy, there is this prophecy in Ezekiel 38 and 39. Everybody talks about it all the time. Now, one, I don't think this is happening anytime soon. I actually think that Ezekiel 38, 39 is more towards the end of the 70th week, not at the beginning. And there's a lot of disagreement on this. So I want to make this statement. So I did a talk with Olivier Melnick. Olivier Melnick and I disagree on the timing of the rapture, but we're very good friends. He's been here to church to speak. I've been to his church to speak. And I think we really need to set aside some of these arguments on what happens in the future. Because one thing we know is that you really shouldn't have an argument about things that are facts, things that have actually happened in time and space. A lot of the things in eschatology have not yet happened. And so there is significant disagreement among Bible prophecy experts. I run into them all the time. I talk to them. I do interviews with them. And it's funny because nobody agrees on everything. Everybody has their own different view. And I think it's a little bit, I just don't like the division over things that are going to happen in the future. We can talk about the things that are going to happen. We can do righteous speculation about when they're going to happen and the order that they're going to happen in. But I have a problem where we get into this really big division about it. So that's my preliminary thing. So in Ezekiel chapter 38, 39, here's one area of dispute. It talks about from the far north. It talks about Gog, Magog. It talks about Meshach, Tubal, Togarmah. It talks about Persia. And we know, for example, that Iran is about 55% ethnic Persian. It has a lot of other minorities that people are, I think, trying to exploit in some cases, some people in the West, to try to divide Iran. It'd be much easier to deal with smaller powers than a big power. But be that as it may, it's clear that Persia is part of this coalition that comes against Israel in the last days. It's also clear that Turkey is part of this coalition, and I've got a fairly long video, if I have time to play it today, I'm going to play it, of a Turkish admiral that's sort of talking about the response to the Abraham Accords. And then it also, there's a lot of people think that Russia is involved. I'm open-minded on that. I'm not thoroughly convinced. But if Russia happens, then I'll say, yeah, I've been talking about that all along, because it is possible that it's Russia. And one of the interesting things is it says, I will put hooks in your jaw and drag you in. And then the question always becomes, what are the hooks in your jaws? And I've mentioned this a number of times before. I sort of picked up on this with an interview. I was doing an interview with Miri Eisen, and in preparation for that interview, actually may not look like it, but I actually do prep work before I interview people. I was listening to some of her interviews, and she said that one, the only world leader that ever scared her physically when she was in his presence, she was a government spokesperson, was Vladimir Putin. She said he physically scared me when I was he's the only one, scared me to be physically in his presence. And number two, she says, but a lot of people don't realize that a significant portion of Israel are ethnic Russians, Russian-speaking Jews that came in from the Soviet Union. So two things about that. One, and I've run into them. I mean, I remember trying to buy gas up in the Nahariya, and the guy was this kind of big burly Russian. He spoke kind of Hebrew and broken English with a Russian accent. You know, it was kind of strange. But the other thing too is that a tremendous amount of the technological brain power that's come into Israel over the years, the Prime Minister Netanyahu just talked about, are Russian-speaking Jews. And if you think now, so try to put this, and so this is, I'm a lawyer, so I try to connect dots. And one of the dots that I connect is that I see that the reason Putin went into Ukraine, one of his big stated reasons was to protect what? Ethnic Russians. Now we have brain power from Russia in Israel. Is he going to get it in his mind that he needs to protect ethnic Russians in Israel? And this is part of the reason. This is the hook in the jaw that drags him in. Now, I would say if you go to any Bible prophecy conference and you lined everybody up and ask them about John Haller's theory, they would say, that's crazy. Okay. You know, I love it eventually when people agree with me. So we'll just wait for that in the future, and I may not be alive to see it, so it's no big deal. But that's a possibility. And so you're seeing this alignment of the nations, but as I've shared many times, I was at a dinner with Chuck Missler and Bill Koenig in Arizona one night. I asked Chuck, do you get excited? And Chuck said, yeah, but, you know, I really watched Turkey. This is like 16, 17 years ago. And ever since then, I took Chuck's advice. I've watched Turkey. And this week we're seeing a lot of that with Turkey. So the question is, how is all of this going to work out? Now, as I've mentioned, there's been a big push. This is a billboard that was put up in Israel, Tel Aviv. In the upper right-hand corner, it says Coalition for Regional Security. And we talked about this. We know these Bible verses all the time. When they say peace and security, then sudden destruction comes. And what I'm trying to convey to you is watch when secular people who don't know Bible prophecy speak in the language of what Bible prophetic passages say when they see peace and security. So now here's this new group in Israel. They put this stuff up back in January of this year, abrahamshield.org. And what they're trying to do is called the Coalition for Regional Security. So when you see people using the biblical terms that we talk about in Bible prophecy, pay attention to what they do, because I think it's very important. And so when you see Turkey being prominent, or Russia being prominent, or Persia/Iran being prominent, that's things you ought to pay attention to. That ought to be part of your grid, is look for people using Bible prophecy terms that don't have a clue about Bible prophecy. And so here you see this poster put up, and it talks about, I can't remember what the Hebrew phrase there, the big bold phrase is something about the Abraham covenant. Okay, thank you. Always glad to have foreign language. And but understand, it talks about we want to bring about a new or renew the Abraham covenant. That's biblical language that they're using. Now, some of these people are religious Jewish people that are behind this organization. I know some of them. But they're using those terms. And then there's a theory out there that I am increasingly subscribing to about that there's a Psalm 83 coalition that's going to come together. And Psalm 83 talks about they're going to come together and they're going to connive and conspire against Israel to wipe them out. But what's one of the ways that you connive and conspire? Well, you do it's like